Let us see how we can make use of a non-nullable in the Dart. And if you are coming from the Kotlin, you may be already familiar with the nullable and the non-nullability in the Kotlin programming language. So let us also take a look on the Dart side how we can make use of the non-nullable type. And prior to the Dart version of, if you go to the pub.spec over here, just open this one, and you can see that we have a Dart version of 2.14.3. all right, so this is the Dart version that we are currently using, and if you are using lower than the 2.12, then there is no non-nullability. So by default you can assign a null value, but after the version of 2.12 we have a non-nullability, or the non-nullable type we can assign. So let us go and see how we can make use of all of those stuff. So for that, let's go and create a new project. I'll just hit the F1 and just select the Dart new project, and then a simple console application, and here there is a Dart basic. I'll just select this particular basic folder and give a Dart, and I'll just say none none underscore nullable, non-nullable. Okay, so we got that particular project created for us, and now you can just go to the bin, and inside that folder, bin folder, you have the project over here. So we have a run and the particular main functionality, and we have already checked out on this particular previous lesson. So I hope you have already watched that one. If you haven't, just make sure go and watch about this particular main function. I'm not going to explain it over here. So we will be looking into the non-nullable type in this section. So let me create first of all one variable. Let's say a string, and let's say a name which we can just assign it to the null. And then I can just say over here, go and print that particular value as a name. And you can see that what it's saying is you cannot assign a value of a type null, can't be assigned to a variable type of string, right? So which means that this is a value, then it is a non-nullable type, which means that non-nullable is already by default enabled. So if you go to this particular pub.spec.log file, and you can see that we have this particular version over here. If you want to go over here also, it's fine that the dependency of the environment for the SDK is 2.14.3, right? If you change it to lower version, which is lower than the 2.12, then you are able to make use of the nullable type. So whenever you create a variable, you can assign a null value. But as I mentioned, since the Dart version of the 2.12, we are unable to do that one. And now if you want to create a nullable variable, then we have to make use of the nullable operator, which is a question mark. And then with this, we can say that this value or this variable name or this variable can be a null, can hold a null value. Otherwise, if you remove this the nullable the question mark or the operator over here, so it will give you an error says that a value of a null, a type of the null can be assigned to a variable type of the string, because by default now this string variable is non-nullable, which means it cannot hold a null value. So if you want to hold a null value, then you just have to make sure you use the nullable operator, or we can call it as a question mark operator over here. And then now you can just go and particularly run this application, and you can get a value as a null over here. And also, like if you have some previously, if you know that when we didn't have this particular option over here, and if you had assigned a null value, and let's say if you have a let's say I have another var and just say account, and if I something say like name dot the length over here, and if I try to access this particular account, because it will give me the length of this particular name variable, and then I try to print that particular count over here, and sorry, print particular count variable over here, then that's what give me a not the compile time, it's a runtime error. So it was a runtime error because in the compile time it was unable to check it, and when your application is running, and it will find that, oh, this variable name doesn't have any value, it's just a null, and it cannot get a length from a null variable, right? So it will crash your application, and which we call as a null pointer exception. If you are in the Java or Kotlin, you may be already familiar that there is a null pointer exception, and people will also call this one as a $1 billion mistake, or right, so $1 billion bug. So whatever people are calling is because you cannot find it actually in your code, right? It's not giving any like compile time over here, saying that you have some error over here. Of course, because now we have a version of a 2.14 over here, which support the non-nullable type. But if in the previous version of the Dart, it was able to get that particular error because we were able to assign this null value, and in the code over here below, you may write 100 or 1,000 of code, and you may get this particular type of this function call over here, because you have a null and you still call it the length over here. That will obviously go and crash your application. So but now it is a null safe, which means that we can have a nullable variable. And now if I go and try to do something like this, it will give me an error says that the property length can't be unconditionally accessed because the receiver can be of a null. So this is a great about the nullable non-nullable type variable, which means that if we set it to a nullable, then it will have a compile time error, not a runtime error. So there is a compile time error and the runtime error. So runtime error means when your application is running, that time you get a runtime error, but the compile time error is whenever you are writing your code and the code get compiled, at that time there is a compile time error. So compile time error is very good because we find out the bugs and the error in the compile time. We don't have to run our application and find out what is wrong in our application, why our application is crashing. So that is a great headache for a developer because you need to debug a whole of your application. So we can see over here, and then now if I want to still check that one, I need to make it as a check it nullable check for the null value. So if I say add a question mark over here, or the null check the operator over here, then it will say that okay, I'm going to check this one and see that whether this value has any null. If it is not null, then only I'll go and get the length function, call this particular function, and if it is null, then I'm not going to go and call this particular length function on this variable name. So now if I go and run this one, you can see I get a null and null, and the application is still running and it doesn't crash. So if I say I have something like null over here, which is a string, now it has some value, and now if I try to run my application, you will see that I get a count of the 4, but still have some warning over here which says that the question mark type of string which can exclude null. What it actually says is the receiver, if you point it over here, it says the receiver can't be null, so null aware operator, which is a question mark, it's unnecessary. So this is already has a value, right? So we have already assigned a value. It is not null, so its compiler is telling that okay, so your variable is not a nullable type, so you can just remove this one. And then if I try to run my application again, so you can just get without any warning, you get a null and the 4, which is the count of this particular 1 2 3 4. That is the length of that particular the value that we have inside our name. And also, like let's say if you have a null over here, right? So let's say we have a variable name of a name which is a null, and we make it as a nullable type. And now if I don't want to use check for null over here, or null access operator, or we call it as a question mark over here, and say that I don't want to check this one. I just want to go ahead and execute this function. So I just say, okay, don't check for a nullable operator, and I'm sure that I have already assigned this value. Just go and execute this function. So now this function will be executed over here, and then you can see again we have an error over here. You can see we get an error over here. Null check operator used on the null value over here. Why? Because the bang operator or the exclamation mark over here says that, okay, this value is already assigned. You don't have to care about a check for the null. I'm sure that this value is already has a value. Just go and execute this function over here. So that's why it will go and crash our application. That is not a good practice. And make sure you, if you are creating a nullable variable, then make sure you always use a safe call over here. Safe call means that we always check for the variable has a null value or not. Then only go and execute that particular function. But sometimes you may want to use this exclamation mark, and at that time you must make sure that this value that you're accessing or the function that you're accessing is not null. So this variable should not be null before you are going to access it. Otherwise your application will obviously go and crash it. So it's always best to make use of a safe call over here and use a question mark operator over here. And there is a small warning that is coming from the lint. It's mentioned don't explicitly initialize the variable to the null. That is basically coming from our analysis underscore option.yaml file over here. This is the lint, the Dart linting or the Flutter lint, whatever you want to call it. It is coming from here, and that is already added inside the pubspec.yml file over here, and which is using a lint over here. So lint is if you are coming from the Android background, you should be already familiar with the lint. Android also has the lint, and it is a code analysis, or it's going to analyze your code and check for all of those best practices and all of those stuff, right? So it's mentioned over here is do not, if you are setting it as a null, and which means that do not explicitly initialize this variable to null. So what we can do is we can just remove this equals to null, and now when we said that we added a null operator, the question mark operator over here, it will by default has a value of the null over here. So when we set it as this particular question mark operator over here, or the nullable operator over here, it will make the value of this particular variable name as a default as a null. So that's why it's saying that you can remove that one. It's not compulsory to add that one. So now you can see we get a value of a null over here. But if you want to assign a value, then you must add a default value over here. And I hope you enjoyed this lecture and learned something new over here about the Dart nullable type and the non-nullable type, and how to make use of the null operator and the safe call, as well as the bang operator or the exclamation mark when you are using or dealing with the nullable and the nullable type in the Dart programming language. So let's meet up in the next one. Till then, have a great day.